Captain Jake Morrison stood at the big window of his ship and looked out at the stars. The ship was called the UES Defiant, and it was not like any other ship humans had ever built. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. They all knew this mission might be their last dot. The Zarian Empire had ruled over humans for 50 long years. They took Earth's metals and food. They told humans what they could and could not do. They made sure humans stayed weak and could never fight back. Every human child grew up knowing they were not free. But today was different. Today, humans would show the galaxy something new. Lisa Blake was the chief engineer. She was a smart woman who had worked on the ship's special engine for 3 years. The engine was built using ideas that most people said were impossible. She checked her screens one more time and smiled. "Captain, all systems are ready," she said. Jake nodded. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had seen too much pain in his life. His own father had died working in the Zarian mines. His sister had been taken away when she was just 16 to work on their ships. Jake had joined the secret human resistance when he was 20. Now, at 45, he was finally getting his chance to strike back. Ryan Carter sat at the navigation station. He was young, only 28, but he was the best pilot humans had. His fingers moved over the controls like he was playing music. He had studied the route through the Kepler Nebula for months. It was dangerous space, full of gas clouds and strange energy. But it was also where they needed to go. "Course is set," Captain Ryan said. "The nebula entrance is 2 hours away." Amy Rodriguez was at the communication station. She was listening to all the radio signals in space. Her job was to watch for Zarian ships and to send messages back to Earth. She had been doing this job for 8 years, and she was very good at it. "Captain," Amy said, her voice worried, "I'm picking up Zarian patrol ships near the nebula. 3 of them, they're staying far away, but they're watching." Jake was not surprised. The Zarians watched everything. They had spies everywhere. They probably knew something was happening, but they did not know what. "Let them watch," Jake said. "Soon they'll see something they never expected." On the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Zactile was looking at reports on his command ship. The ship was huge, 10 times bigger than any human ship. It was called the Dominion's Edge, and it carried enough weapons to destroy a small planet. Zactile was tall and thin, with 4 purple eyes and skin like a snake. He had been fighting wars for the Empire for 60 years. He had destroyed many worlds and killed many enemies. But today, something felt wrong. "Commander Veltar!" he called to his officer. "Tell me about this human ship." Veltar was smaller than the Admiral, with tentacles instead of arms. His tentacles moved nervously as he spoke. "Sir, our scouts found one human ship going into the Kepler Nebula 3 days ago. But the energy it was giving off, it's not like anything we've seen from humans before." "Show me," Zactile ordered. The screens around them lit up with numbers and charts. Zactile studied them carefully. His 4 eyes moved back and forth as he read the data. What he saw made no sense. "This can't be right," he said. "This energy reading is higher than our best battleship. Humans don't have technology like this. We made sure of that." "I thought the same thing, sir," Veltar said. "But I checked the readings 5 times. Our sensors are working perfectly." Zactile felt something he had not felt in many years. Fear. Not fear of dying in battle. He had faced that many times. This was different. This was fear of the unknown. Back on the Defiant, Dr. Helen Parker was in the engine room with Lisa Blake. Helen was a scientist who had spent her whole life studying energy and matter. She was the one who had figured out how to build the new engine. Lisa said, "Are you sure this will work?" Helen looked at the big metal cylinder in the center of the room. It was humming with power, and strange lights moved around inside. The cylinder contained something that should not exist, matter that was both there and not there at the same time. "Lisa, I've been working on this for 15 years, Helen said. "Ever since the Zarians destroyed my home city, they think they know all the laws of science. They think they understand how the universe works, but they're wrong." The 2 women stood looking at the engine. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Inside that cylinder was enough power to move mountains, bend space, and change the rules of reality itself. The Xerians used brute force, Helen continued. They built bigger guns and stronger armor, but we learned to think differently. We learned to work with the universe instead of fighting against it. On the bridge, Jake was talking to his crew. These 25 men and women had volunteered for a mission that everyone said was suicide. They all had reasons for being here. Some had lost family to the Xerians. Others just wanted to be free. All of them were brave people, Jake said. In 1 hour, we're going to do something that has never been done before. The Xerians think humans are weak. They think we're just good for digging in their mines and growing their food. Today, we show them they're wrong. Greg Williams was at the weapons station, but there were no normal weapons on this ship. Instead, his station controlled systems that could change the shape of space itself. He was a former soldier who had fought the Xerians for 10 years before joining this mission. Captain Greg said, defensive systems are online. If they try to stop us, they're going to get a big surprise. The ship moved through space toward the nebula. It looked like a normal human ship from the outside, but inside, it was something completely new. The engine used principles that human scientists had only dreamed about before. It could bend the laws of physics like they were made of soft clay. Amy Rodriguez suddenly looked up from her station. Captain, I'm getting a message from Earth Command. Admiral Stone wants to know if we're ready to begin the tests. Jake thought about Earth far behind them. He thought about the billions of humans living under Xerian rule. He thought about the children who had never known freedom and the old people who had given up hope. Tell Admiral Stone that we are ready, Jake said. Tell him that after today, the Xerians will never look at humans the same way again. The Defiant reached the edge of the Kepler Nebula. The space around them was filled with colorful gas clouds and strange energy fields. It was beautiful, but it was also dangerous. Many ships had been lost in the nebula over the years. All stations report ready. Captain, Lisa Blake called from engineering. Jake looked around at his crew one last time. They were good people, brave people. They deserved to be free, and so did every other human in the galaxy. Very well, Jake said, his voice calm and strong. Begin the Prometheus Protocol. The ship began to change. The humming got louder. The lights got brighter. Energy that had never existed before started flowing through the ship's systems. In the engine room, Helen Parker watched as her life's work came alive. Outside, space itself began to bend and twist around the Defiant. The Xerian patrol ships watching from far away suddenly saw their instruments go crazy. Energy readings shot up to impossible levels. Their captains stared at their screens in shock. The human ship was doing something that should not be possible, something that would change everything. 3 days after the Defiant entered the Kepler Nebula, panic spread through the Xerian Empire like wildfire. Fleet Admiral Curvith was in his private chamber aboard the massive warship Eternal Dominion when the emergency call came in. He had been eating his morning meal when the red lights started flashing. Curvith was the supreme commander of the 3rd Expansion Fleet. He was old, even for a Xerian, with thick armor plates covering his body and 6 arms that could move faster than human eyes could follow. He had conquered 47 worlds for the Empire. He had never lost a battle, but the report he was reading made his blood run cold. Get me a war council now, he ordered his aide. Call all my generals and admirals. This is a code red emergency. Within an hour, the command center of the Eternal Dominion was filled with the Empire's top military leaders. General Hicksmore stood at attention, his scaled hide changing colors as he became nervous. Admiral Drakvel floated in her water tank, her tentacles moving in worried patterns. Science Officer Koveth worked at her station with all 6 arms, running numbers and checking data over and over again. Someone explain to me what is happening, Koveth said, his voice echoing through the metal chamber. I'm told that one human ship has energy readings that make no sense. I'm told our best scientists think their instruments are broken, but I know our instruments work perfectly. General Hicksmore stepped forward. He was a warrior who had fought in 100 battles. His armor was covered with scars from enemy weapons, but now he looked afraid. Sir, the readings must be wrong, he said. No single ship can make that much energy. It would take the power cores from 20 of our battleships working together. Humans don't have technology like that. We've been watching them for 50 years. We control what they can build. Science Officer Koveth looked up from her workstation. Her 6 arms moved across multiple screens at once, bringing up charts and numbers that filled the air with light. General, I've checked the readings 17 times, she said. I've tested our sensors. I've had 3 other ships confirm the data. That human vessel is putting out energy levels that are 12 times higher than our theoretical maximum. According to our science, what they're doing should be impossible. The room fell silent. These were beings who had ruled the galaxy for 800 years. They had seen strange things on distant worlds. They had fought enemies with unusual weapons. But they had never encountered anything like this. Admiral Drakvel spoke from her water tank, her voice coming through electronic speakers. Could this be some kind of trick? Maybe they're using multiple ships, but making them look like one. No, Koveth replied. Our sensors can detect individual ship signatures. This is definitely one vessel. And the energy type, it's not like anything in our databases. It's not fusion power, not antimatter, not even zero-point energy. It's something completely new. On the bridge of the Defiant, Captain Jake Morrison stood looking at the tactical display. The ship had been inside the nebula for 3 days now, and the crew was getting ready for the next phase of their mission. The strange energy around them made the nebula glow with colors that had no names. Dr. Helen Parker had barely slept since they entered the nebula. She was in the engine room constantly, watching the exotic matter containment systems. The technology they were using was so new that every moment was a test. One small mistake could destroy not just their ship, but probably the entire nebula. Captain, called Tactical Officer Greg Williams from his station. Zarian forces are moving toward us. Long-range sensors show 3 destroyer squadrons coming. This way, that's 18 ships total. Jake studied the display. 18 Zarian warships against 1 human vessel. Under normal conditions, it would be a slaughter. The Zarians had weapons that could turn planets into dust. Their shields could stop almost any attack. Their ships were built for war and nothing else. But these were not normal conditions. How long until they reach us? Jake asked. About 6 hours, sir, Greg replied. They're coming fast, but they're being careful. They're probably trying to figure out what we are. Chief Engineer Lisa Blake's voice came over the communication system from the engine room. Captain, all systems are stable. The quantum cascade generators are working perfectly. Our defensive matrices are charging up to full power. Jake pressed the button to talk to his entire crew. All hands, this is the captain. In a few hours, we're going to face 18 enemy warships. Under normal circumstances, we wouldn't have a chance, but we're not normal anymore. What we're carrying in our engine room is going to change everything. In the engine room, Helen Parker stood next to the exotic matter containment unit. It was a cylinder about the size of a small room, made of materials that didn't exist anywhere else in the galaxy. Inside, matter that existed in multiple dimensions at the same time swirled in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Lisa, Helen said to the chief engineer, "Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing?" Lisa looked at her friend. They had worked together for 3 years, building something that everyone said was impossible. They had used theories that most scientists thought were crazy, but somehow they had made it work. Helen, I think about my brother every day, Lisa said. The Zarians took him when he was 18, sent him to work in their factories. I got 1 letter from him in 5 years, and then nothing. If what we're doing here can free people like him, then yes, we're doing the right thing. The 2 women looked at the containment unit. It was beautiful in a way that was hard to describe. The energy inside moved like liquid light, changing colors and shapes as it flowed. But it was also terrifying. Inside that cylinder was enough power to tear holes in space itself. The Zarians think they understand the universe, Helen said. They think they know all the rules, but they only know the rules that limit them. We learn to find the rules that free us. Meanwhile, on the Zarian command ship, Admiral Curvith was getting more reports. Each one made less sense than the last. The human ship was not just producing impossible amounts of energy. It was doing things that violated basic physics, sir, reported his sensor officer. The human vessel appears to be moving through solid matter. It passed through 3 large asteroids without slowing down or taking damage. That's impossible, General Hicksmore said. Nothing can pass through solid matter. That's a basic law of physics. Tell that to the humans, the sensor officer replied. They just did it. Science Officer Kovith was working furiously at her station. She had called in every expert the Empire had. Physicists, engineers, and weapons specialists were all trying to understand what they were seeing. Admiral, she said, I think we need to consider the possibility that the humans have discovered something we don't understand. Something that changes the basic rules. The room fell silent again. For 8 centuries, the Zarian Empire had been the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had conquered worlds, enslaved species, and built an empire that spanned thousands of star systems. The idea that humans, whom they had kept deliberately primitive, could develop superior technology was almost too much to accept. Back on the Defiant, Communications Officer Amy Rodriguez was monitoring all the Zarian communications she could intercept. What she was hearing made her smile. Captain, she said, you should hear this. The Zarians are panicking. They're calling emergency meetings. They're bringing in their best scientists. They have no idea what we are. Jake looked at the tactical display again. The 18 Zarian ships were getting closer. In a few hours, they would arrive and demand that the humans surrender. But surrender was not an option, not anymore. Amy sent a message to Earth Command. Jake said, tell Admiral Stone that we are about to begin the field test. Tell him that after today, the galaxy will never be the same. The Defiant continued. Moving through the nebula, its impossible engines bending the laws of physics with every passing moment. Behind it, space itself seemed to ripple and change, as if reality was having trouble keeping up with what the human ship was doing. Soon, the Zarians would arrive. Soon, they would see what humanity had become. And soon, the age of human subjugation would end forever. The battle that would change the galaxy forever lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. But those 4 minutes felt like hours to everyone who witnessed them. Captain Dexler commanded the Zarian destroyer Stellarmite. He was a veteran warrior who had fought in dozens of battles across the galaxy. His ship was one of 18 destroyers that had been sent to deal with the strange human vessel. As they approached the location where the humans were hiding, Dexler felt confident. 18 ships against one was hardly a fair fight. Sensors report, Dexler ordered from his command chair. His sensor operator, a young Zarian named Kilvex, worked at his station with nervous energy. Sir, I'm getting very strange readings. The human ship it's hard to explain. Sometimes it shows up on sensors, sometimes it doesn't. And the energy output is still impossible to measure. Dexler frowned. He had been told about the energy readings, but he thought his commanders were being too cautious. Humans were weak. They had always been weak. One ship could not defeat 18, no matter what kind of engines it had. All ships. This is Dexler, he said into his communication system. Form attack pattern 7. We'll surround the human vessel and demand surrender. If they refuse, we destroy them quickly. The 18 destroyers moved into position. Each ship was 3 times the size of the human vessel. Each carried enough weapons to level a city. Their shields could stop almost any weapon ever built. Dexler had used this same attack pattern against rebels and pirates for 20 years. It always worked. But as they got closer to the human ship, something felt wrong. On the bridge of the Defiant, Captain Jake Morrison watched the Zarian ships approach. His crew was calm and ready. They had trained for this moment for months. Everything depended on what happened in the next few minutes. Tactical report, Jake said. Greg Williams looked at his displays. 18 destroyers, sir. They're forming a standard attack pattern. Looks like they want to surround us and force a surrender. Let them get close, Jake said. We need to make sure they all see what happens next. Dr. Helen Parker's voice came over the communication system from the engine room. Captain, all systems are ready. The reality adjustment protocol is standing by for your command. Jake took a deep breath. The reality adjustment protocol was what they called their secret weapon. It was based on Helen's discovery that space and time were not as solid as everyone thought. With the right kind of energy, applied in the right way, you could change the basic rules of how things worked. All hands, prepare for protocol activation," Jake announced to his crew. Chief Engineer Lisa Blake was in the engine room with Helen, watching the exotic matter containment systems. The energy levels were climbing higher than they had ever gone before. The cylinder that held their impossible fuel was glowing so brightly that they had to wear special glasses to look at it. "Helen, are you sure this won't tear a hole in space?" Lisa asked. Helen smiled, but her hands were shaking slightly. "Lisa, we're about to find out. But remember, we're not trying to destroy anything. We're just going to show them that their rules don't apply to us anymore." Back on the Stellarmite, Captain Dexler was getting more confused by the minute. His targeting systems couldn't lock onto the human ship. Every time his computers tried to aim weapons at it, the target would shift slightly, as if it wasn't quite where it appeared to be. "Kilvex, what's wrong with our targeting computers?" he demanded. The sensor operator's tentacles were writhing with stress. "Sir, I don't think anything is wrong with our computers. I think the human ship is. It's moving in and out of normal space. One second it's there, the next second it's somewhere else, but not really somewhere else, if that makes sense." "That makes no sense at all," Dexler snapped. "Nothing can move in and out of normal space. That would require technology that doesn't exist." "Sir," another officer called out, "the other ships are reporting the same problems. Nobody can get a weapons lock." Dexler felt the first touch of real fear. In all his years of fighting, he had never encountered an enemy he couldn't target. But he was a professional soldier. He had orders to carry out all ships, prepare to fire anyway. He commanded, "Saturate the area with plasma bolts. We don't need to aim if we hit everything." On the Defiant, Amy Rodriguez was listening to the Zarian communications. "Captain, they're getting ready to fire. All ships are charging weapons." Jake nodded. "Perfect. Greg, are you ready?" Greg Williams had his hands over the controls for the reality adjustment protocol. His station looked nothing like a normal weapons console. Instead of buttons for missiles and lasers, he had controls that would bend space itself. "Ready, sir?" Greg said. "Helen, this is it," Jake said into his communicator. In the engine room, Helen Parker looked at Lisa Blake. "Well, my friend, let's change the universe." She pressed a series of controls, and the exotic matter containment unit began to sing. The sound was unlike anything ever heard before, a harmony that seemed to come from the very fabric of space itself. "Protocol activated," Helen reported. What happened next would be studied by scientists for centuries. The space around the Defiant began to change. It didn't explode or flash with light. Instead, it simply became different. The laws of physics that had governed the universe for billions of years suddenly had new rules added to them. On the Stellarmite, Kilvex watched his sensors go completely insane. "Sir, I'm reading. I don't know what I'm reading. Space itself is changing around the human ship." Dexler looked at his main screen and saw something that his mind refused to believe. The human vessel was still there, but it was also not there. It existed in normal space, but also seemed to exist in other places at the same time. "Fire all weapons," he ordered desperately. 18 Zarian destroyers opened fire at once. Hundreds of plasma bolts and energy beams shot toward the human ship. It should have been destroyed instantly. Instead, something impossible happened. 12 of the 18 ships simply vanished, not destroyed, not damaged. They just stopped existing in normal space. One moment they were there, firing their weapons. The next moment there was empty space where they had been. What happened to the other ships? Dexler screamed at his sensor operator. Kilvex was shaking as he worked at his controls. "Sir, they're there, gone. Not destroyed, just gone. I think they've been moved to a different dimension." The remaining 6 ships, including the Stellarmite, found that their weapons had simply stopped working. Their power cores were still running, their engines still functioned, but every weapon system on every ship had gone completely dead. On the Defiant, the crew watched in amazement as their impossible technology worked exactly as Helen had predicted. The 12 ships that had vanished weren't destroyed. They had been moved to a parallel reality where they could do no harm to anyone. The 6 remaining ships had their weapon systems drained of power by the same dimensional effects that protected the human vessel. "My God," Greg Williams whispered. "We actually did it. Jake pressed his communicator button. Amy, are you getting any transmissions from Earth Command? Amy Rodriguez was grinning as she worked at her station. Yes, sir. Admiral Stone wants to know if the test was successful. Jake looked at the tactical display, where 18 enemy ships had been just minutes before. There were now only 6 drifting hulks and a lot of empty space. The Defiant hadn't fired a single conventional weapon, yet the entire Zarian attack force had been neutralized. Tell the Admiral that the test exceeded all our expectations, Jake said. Tell him that humanity is no longer defenseless. But the real message was being broadcast automatically to every Zarian listening post within 100 light years. The ship's computers were sending detailed recordings of what had just happened. Soon, every Zarian commander in the galaxy would know that humans had developed technology that made their empire's military might completely obsolete. On the bridge of the Stellar Might, Captain Dexler sat in stunned silence. His weapons were dead. 12 of his ships were gone. And the human vessel was still there, apparently undamaged and certainly untouchable. Sir, Kilvik said quietly, what are your orders? Dexler didn't answer for a long time. He was a career military officer who had never encountered a situation like this. How do you fight an enemy that can rewrite the laws of physics? Send a message to Fleet Command. He finally said, tell them that everything we thought we knew about humans is wrong. Tell them that the galaxy just changed forever. The age of human subjugation was over. The age of human liberation had begun, and every being in the galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the greatest victories come not from having the biggest weapons, but from learning to see the universe in a completely different way. The emergency session of the Zarian High Command took place on the capital world of Zerios Prime in a crystal chamber that had been built 1,000 years ago. The room had seen the planning of countless wars and the conquest of dozens of worlds, but it had never seen panic like this. Emperor Vorax the Undying sat on his throne of black metal at the center of the chamber. He was ancient, even by Zarian standards. Having ruled the empire for 3 centuries, his body was covered in armor that had been grafted to his flesh long ago. 4 red eyes glowed in his massive head as he looked down at his assembled commanders. For the first time in 300 years, the Emperor himself had called an emergency meeting. The news from the outer territories was so shocking that normal military channels could not handle it. Something had happened that challenged the very foundation of the Empire. Explain to me. The Emperor's voice boomed through the crystal chamber, each word carrying the weight of absolute power. How a species we have kept weak for 50 years has suddenly developed technology that makes our fleets useless. Grand Admiral Zixila stood at attention in the center of the room. She was the commander of all Imperial forces, responsible for the military might that kept billions of beings under Zarian control. Her 6 arms held data tablets that contained the most disturbing intelligence reports the Empire had ever received. Your Majesty, she began, her voice carefully controlled. The human vessel that engaged our destroyer squadron demonstrated capabilities that our scientists say are impossible. The ship used dimensional manipulation, matter-energy conversion on a massive scale, and what appears to be controlled space-time distortion. Military advisor Kelthy stepped forward. He was one of the Empire's top strategic minds, a being who had planned the conquest of 30 worlds. His scaled face showed fear that he was trying hard to hide. Your Majesty, this was not an isolated event. He said, our long-range sensors have detected similar energy signatures at multiple human colony worlds. They appear to be upgrading their entire civilization with this new technology. The Emperor's 4 eyes focused on the advisor with burning intensity. How many worlds? At least 47, Your Majesty. And the number is growing every day. A terrible silence filled the chamber. The Zarian Empire controlled over 2,000 worlds, but 47 human worlds with impossible technology was a threat they had never faced before. Science Council leader Murtik floated in his gravity chair to the center of the room. He was responsible for all research and development in the Empire. His multiple brains had solved thousands of technical problems over the centuries. But this problem was beyond anything he had ever encountered. Your Majesty, he said, we have analyzed the energy readings from the human vessel. The technology they demonstrated requires an understanding of quantum mechanics and dimensional physics that we do not possess. They have discovered principles that we didn't even know existed. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. Are you telling me that humans, whom we have treated as primitive workers, are now more advanced than we are? I'm afraid that may be the case, Your Majesty. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Linda Martinez stood before the United Earth Assembly in the Great Hall in New Geneva. Representatives from every human colony world were present, either in person or through holographic projection. The mood in the room was electric with excitement and hope. Fellow citizens of Earth and her colonies, President Martinez began, her voice carrying to every corner of human space. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in human history. For 50 years, we have lived under Zarian occupation. They took our resources. They controlled our technology. They told us what we could and could not do. That ends today. Behind her, huge screens showed images of the 12 new ships being built in orbital shipyards around Earth. Each ship was like the Defiant, equipped with technology that could reshape reality itself. The workers building these vessels moved with the precision of people who knew they were creating humanity's future. Dr. Carl Anderson, the lead scientist on the Prometheus project, stepped up to address the assembly. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes, but his voice was strong with conviction. Representatives, what we have achieved is not just better weapons or faster ships, he said. We have fundamentally changed our understanding of how the universe works. The Zirians built their empire using brute force and overwhelming firepower. We have learned to work with the basic structures of reality itself. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not just developed superior weapons, they had discovered entirely new branches of physics that made the Zarian Empire's technological foundation obsolete overnight. In the audience, Colonel Kate Foster listened with tears in her eyes. She had spent 20 years fighting the Zirians. In the resistance, she had lost friends, family, and hope. But now, for the first time in decades, she could see a future where humans were truly free. Dr. Anderson called out Representative Bill Parker from the Mars colony. What about the Zirians who are not military? What about the civilians on their worlds? Dr. Anderson smiled. Representative, our technology is not designed to destroy, it's designed to liberate. We can disable their weapons and their war machines without harming anyone. We can free the slaves they have taken from a dozen worlds without firing a shot. Back on Zerios Prime, the emergency session was growing more desperate by the hour. Intelligence reports were coming in from across the galaxy, and each one brought worse news. Your Majesty, reported Admiral Zixila, 17 of our Corps, worlds have lost contact with Imperial Command in the past week. We believe human ships have visited these systems and offered the local populations an alternative to Imperial rule. What do you mean, an alternative? The Emperor demanded. The humans appear to be sharing their technology. Your Majesty, they're giving other species the tools they need to defend themselves against us. The Emperor's four eyes burned with rage. For 800 years, the Zarian Empire had maintained control through superior technology and overwhelming force. No one had ever challenged their dominance successfully. Now, humans were not just freeing themselves, they were freeing everyone. How is this possible? The Emperor roared. We control their education systems. We monitor their research. We made sure they could never develop advanced technology. Science Council leader Morthic spoke up again. Your Majesty, I believe that was precisely the problem. We forced them to work within the same limitations that restrict us. When they broke free from those limitations, they discovered possibilities that we never imagined. On the human research station called Freedom Base, Dr. Nina Walsh worked with a team of scientists from 12 different species. The station itself was a marvel of the new human technology, existing partially in normal space and partially in folded dimensions. It was completely invisible to Zarian sensors and absolutely impossible to attack with conventional weapons. Dr. Walsh, said her assistant, a tall blue-skinned being named Veltar who had escaped from Zarian slavery just a week ago. The quantum resonance chambers are ready for the next test. Nina smiled at her new colleague. Veltar was brilliant, one of the best physicists she had ever worked with. The Xerians had used him as a manual laborer in their mines, completely wasting his incredible mind. Excellent, Veltar! Let's see if we can extend the dimensional fold to protect an entire solar system. The test they were planning would create a protective barrier around a star system that would make it completely immune to Xerian attack. If it worked, they could free entire civilizations at once. Back in the Imperial throne room, Emperor Vorax was receiving the most disturbing report yet. Your Majesty, Admiral Zixila said, her voice barely above a whisper. We have lost contact with the Kepler sector fleet. All 47 ships have simply vanished. Destroyed. The Emperor asked. We don't know, Your Majesty. There was no battle, no distress signals. They were there one moment and gone the next. The Emperor sat back on his throne, his ancient mind struggling to process what he was hearing. The Xerian Empire had never faced a threat like this. They had always been the ones with superior technology. They had always been the ones who could make other species disappear. What are our options? He asked finally. The throne room fell silent. For the first time in the Empire's history, its leaders had no answer. How do you fight an enemy that can rewrite the laws of physics? How do you conquer people who can simply step out of your reality when you attack them? Your Majesty, Grand Admiral Zixila said slowly, I believe we may need to consider ... negotiation. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. The Xerian Empire did not negotiate. It conquered, it ruled, it dominated. But now, for the first time in 8 centuries, it might have no choice. The galaxy was changing, and the age of Xerian dominance was coming to an end. 6 months after the battle in the Kepler Nebula, the galaxy looked completely different. The Xerian Empire, which had ruled over thousands of worlds for 8 centuries, was crumbling, not because of war or revolution, but because it had simply become meaningless. Ambassador Crimeth of the Xerian Empire sat in an uncomfortable chair aboard the space station that humans called Liberty Point. The station was unlike anything he had ever seen. It existed partially in normal space and partially in what the humans called folded dimensions. Looking out the windows made his 4 eyes hurt, because sometimes he could see stars that weren't really there. Across the table from him sat Secretary of State Paul Bennett, a calm human with gray hair and kind eyes. Paul had been a teacher before the Xerians conquered Earth. Now he was helping to reshape the galaxy. Secretary Bennett Crimeth began, his translator working hard to find the right words. The Empire wishes to discuss the terms of coexistence. Paul smiled politely and opened a folder filled with papers. Ambassador, I think you mean the terms of the Empire's surrender. Crimeth's tentacles writhed with shock. Surrender! The Empire does not surrender. We have ruled the galaxy for 800 years. We are the strongest military force that has ever existed. Were Paul corrected gently. You were the strongest. But in the past 6 months, 43 of your core worlds have declared independence. Your fleets can't reach them because human ships protect them with dimensional barriers. Your weapons don't work against our technology. What exactly are you the strongest at anymore? The Xerian ambassador looked at his datapad, trying to find something to argue with, but the numbers were clear. Every day, more worlds left the Empire. Not through rebellion or war, but simply by choosing freedom when humans offered them the technology to defend themselves. How can you share such powerful technology so freely? Crimeth asked. Are you not afraid that some species will use it against you? Paul leaned back in his chair. Ambassador, our technology is based on cooperation with the universe, not domination of it. You can't use it to hurt others without hurting yourself. The more you try to use it for evil, the less it works. That's not a feature we built in. That's just how the universe actually works when you understand it properly. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberation. It was the flagship of the Freedom Fleet, a group of 50 human vessels that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Jake had been promoted after the success at Kepler Nebula, but he still preferred to be called Captain Admiral. Called Navigation. Officer Ryan Carter, we're approaching the Zeta Reticuli system. The local population sent a request for assistance 3 days ago. Jake looked at the tactical display. Zeta Reticuli was home to the Milani, a peaceful species that had been enslaved by the Zirians for 200 years. The Milani were excellent engineers, but the Zirians had forced them to work in factories making weapons for the Empire. "What's the situation down there?" Jake asked. "The Zarian garrison has about 50 ships," replied Tactical Officer Greg Williams. "They're demanding that the Milani increase weapon production by 30%. The locals are refusing and asking for our help," Jake nodded. This had become a common pattern across the galaxy. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were finally finding the courage to say no to their oppressors, and humanity was there to help them when the Zirians tried to force compliance. "Take us in, Ryan." Standard Liberation Protocol. The Liberation and her escort ships dropped out of hyperspace above the Milani homeworld. The Zarian garrison fleet immediately moved to intercept them, but they stopped when their sensors detected the human energy signatures. On the Zarian command ship Righteous Fury, Captain Morval stared at his tactical display in despair. He had heard the stories about human ships, but seeing the energy readings in person was terrifying. The human vessels were producing power levels that his ship's computers said were impossible. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, "all our targeting systems are malfunctioning. We can't get a lock on any of the human ships." "Sir," his engineer added, "our power cores are being drained somehow. All weapon systems are going offline." Captain Morval had been a warrior for 30 years. He had conquered worlds and destroyed fleets, but he had never faced an enemy that could disable his ships without even firing a shot. "Open a communication channel to the human flagship," he ordered. On the Liberation, Jake received the incoming transmission. The face of the Zarian captain appeared on his main screen, looking defeated and afraid. "Human Commander, I am Captain Morval of the Zarian Imperial Navy. I request terms for the withdrawal of my forces." Jake studied the alien officer. He could see that this was a career soldier who had probably never retreated from anything in his life, but there was no anger in Jake's voice when he replied. "Captain Morval, you and your ships are free to leave this system immediately. You will not return. You will not threaten the Milani people again. In exchange, you will be allowed to depart safely, and if we refuse," Morval asked. Jake's expression remained calm. "Captain, your weapons don't work. Your shields can't protect you. Your ships can barely move. You're not in a position to refuse anything. But we're not interested in destroying you. We just want you to leave these people alone." Within an hour, the Zarian fleet had jumped to hyperspace, leaving the Milani system for the first time in 2 centuries. On the planet below, millions of beings celebrated their freedom back on Earth. In the Prometheus Research Institute, Dr. Helen Parker worked with a team of scientists from 20 different species. The institute had become the center of galactic scientific cooperation, a place where beings from across the galaxy came to learn about the new physics that humans had discovered. "Dr. Parker," said her research partner, "a crystalline being named Sixtail from the Rigel system. The quantum resonance experiments are showing remarkable results. We've successfully created stable dimensional pockets large enough to protect entire star systems." Helen smiled as she looked at the data. The technology they had developed was not just about military protection. It was opening up possibilities that no one had ever imagined. Entire civilizations could now exist in their own pocket dimensions, safe from any threat. Worlds that had been destroyed by war could be rebuilt in parallel realities. "Sixtail, I think we're ready to share this with the Galaxy Liberation Council," Helen said. The Galaxy Liberation Council was a new organization that had formed spontaneously. As more and more worlds freed themselves from Zarian rule, it wasn't a government exactly, but rather a cooperative group that helped species share technology and resources. President Linda Martinez had been elected as the council's first chairwoman, not because humans demanded to lead, but because other species recognized that humans had started the liberation movement. "Fellow beings," President Martinez addressed the council from Liberty Point Station. 6 months ago, the galaxy was ruled by fear and oppression. Today, over 300 worlds have declared their independence. They are free not because we conquered their oppressors, but because we gave them the tools to free themselves. In the audience, representatives from dozens of species nodded in agreement. The Milani engineer who had helped design the new dimensional shields sat next to a Hegelian philosopher who was writing new theories about cooperative physics. Former Zarian slaves worked alongside beings who had never known oppression. The Zarian Empire is not our enemy, President Martinez continued. Fear is our enemy. Ignorance is our enemy. The belief that some beings must dominate others is our enemy. We offered the Zarians the same thing we offered everyone else. The chance to join a galaxy based on cooperation instead of conquest? On Zerios Prime, Emperor Vorak sat alone in his throne room, reading the final intelligence reports. The empire that had taken him 3 centuries to build was dissolving before his eyes, not through military defeat, but through simple irrelevance. His aide, General Hicksmore, entered the chamber with the latest news. Your Majesty, the Rajal sector has voted to join the Liberation Council. That brings the total to 412 worlds that have left the Empire. The Emperor looked at his general, seeing the defeat in his eyes. How many worlds do we still control? Fewer than 200, Your Majesty, and more are leaving every day. Emperor Vorak stood up from his throne and walked to the great window that looked out over his capital city. For 800 years, this city had been the center of the galaxy's greatest empire. Now it was becoming just another world among many. General, he said finally, prepare a message to the Human Liberation Council. Tell them that the Zarian Empire requests to discuss joining their cooperative. It was the end of an age of domination and the beginning of an age of cooperation. The galaxy had learned that the greatest power was not the ability to destroy, but the ability to create new possibilities. Admiral Jake Morrison wrote in his personal log that night, "Today we received a message from the Zarian Emperor. He wants to talk about joining the Liberation Council. A year ago, that would have seemed impossible. But we've learned that nothing is truly impossible when you understand how the universe really works. The age of human subjugation is over. The age of galactic cooperation has begun,